Now there is an issue, we say, of terrorism. We don't have to discuss Islam versus terrorism, because Islam supports nothing other than itself. Al-Islamu istislamu lillahi bit-tawheed wal-inqiyadu lahu bit-ta'ati. Al-Islam is nothing other than istislam, submission to Allah and His legislation, according to the rules of monotheism. وَالْإِنْقِيَادُ لَهُ بِطَاعَةِ, and surrendering to His Sharia, to His ahkam, without any reservation. Completely surrendering with obedience. This is Islam. And Islam has its sources, which can never be changed until the Day of Judgment. And that is the Quran and that is the Sunnah. So that is one side. Now terrorism is something else. But to treat this issue properly and objectively, we first need to define what is terrorism. No one can make their own definition of terrorism, because the definition doesn't change from day to day and time to time and place to place. An apple is an apple in China, and it does not become an orange in America. And a president of the United States, or a president of Europe state, or a president of Australia, or a president of any country doesn't change the name of terrorism or the meaning of it because of his idea. It is a definition, and according to the language, it has to remain a definition. So if we go to any English dictionary, take the Funk and Wagner, take Webster's, take the Oxford, the highest classical dictionaries in the world for the English language, and see what is the definition of terrorism. Not a definition that just came 70 years ago. Not the definition which just came 50 years ago or 20 years ago. Not a definition that the Americans give, or that the British give, or the Australians give, or the French give, or the Germans give. Not a special definition. No, let's go back to the definition which the Oxford, the Webster, the Funk and Wagner dictionary has given for the last 200 years. The definition of terrorism. And listen very carefully, because after we get the definition, we're going to speak about some actions which have been done in the last 200 years since this definition has been made, and you will tell me, is this actions of terrorism or is it not? It says, terrorism, the act of protracted or spontaneous inflicting of systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. Let me read it again, so there is no mistake. The act of spontaneous or protracted infliction of systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. Now let us examine the last 200 years. Before there was this so-called politicization of this terminology, because this terminology by the United Nations and the G8 countries, that is the countries that are the most developed nations in the world, they have politicized this terminology. They have politicized this definition. In the last 30 years, they have made a special definition for this. But let's go back 200 years and let us see. In the last 200 years, and I want you to add up the numbers as we move along, because those numbers at the end will tell you who have been guilty of terrorism in the last 200 years. The numbers I'm going to give you are the numbers of people that have been systematically slaughtered and destabilized, liquefied, or otherwise eliminated. Let's start out with the invasion of South America by the Portuguese and Spanish conquistadors. And in that incursion, which took place in the 18th century, they slaughtered systematically, destabilized, and otherwise eliminated 56 million people in South America in order to take control of that continent, and they are still holding that continent today. 56 million. How did they do it? Through the act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults with their armies and their weapons upon individuals and places, with human populations, with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. What is that definition? Terrorism.